Welcome to the Explainer. So can you imagine a country being so cornered, so utterly desperate, that it decides to burn its own navy right down to the waterline? Well, that's exactly where we're going today. We're diving into this one critical moment in the War of the Triple Alliance, a single act of strategic desperation that completely changed the game in South America.
Okay, so this quote, this really gets to the absolute heart of what we're talking about. In 19th century South America, forget about highways and railroads for a minute. The rivers were everything. They were literally the arteries for the armies, and if you controlled them, you basically controlled the lifeblood of the entire campaign.
And that brings us right to our first section, all about the terrain itself. Because in this war, the map wasn't just some passive backdrop. It was an active player. You could even say it was a weapon. The geography was the strategy.
You see, for Paraguay especially, its rivers were its destiny. They were the nation's veins, its arteries. They were the only truly reliable way to get men, ammo, and messages from point A to point B. Losing control of those rivers, that wasn't just a minor setback, it was total paralysis.
So the big question is, how did Paraguay manage these incredibly vital waterways? Well, the answer was its navy. But here's the thing, this isn't a story about glorious sea battles. As the war dragged on, the role of Paraguay's fleet became something much more desperate. And, way more essential.
Just look at this timeline. It tells you a whole story of transformation that was really born from a massive defeat. After getting hammered at the Battle of Riachuelo, the Paraguayan Navy just wasn't an offensive force anymore. By 1869, it had become something totally different, a floating lifeline, the one and only artery that was keeping a starving army from completely collapsing.
And this little fleet was everything to the army. It was their bus system, their supply chain, their telegraph line, and their only way to react quickly to enemy movements. If you took that away, you were basically taking away their ability to even fight.
And it's this complete reliance on just a few old, beat-up ships that leads us straight to the climax of our story, a final, desperate act of sacrifice that we now know as Vapor Cué.
So picture this. The date is August 18th, 1869. The last of the Paraguayan ships are trapped in a bend of the Yahegi River. The Brazilian Navy is closing in fast, and the Paraguayan sailors get an order that's almost unimaginable. Burn your own ships, scuttle the fleet, deny the enemy their prize, even if it costs you everything.
7. That's it, just 7 ships. The absolute last remnants of a navy that was once a source of national pride, now cornered and staring at its own end.
And you've got to remember, these weren't exactly state-of-the-art warships. A lot of them were just humble merchant steamers that had been pressed into service for a desperate war. And on that day, their crews had to become both their sailors and their executioners, sending them to a fiery grave at the bottom of the river.
The historian Angel Piccinini put it perfectly. He said, this was way more than just a military tactic. It was the final word, the closing chapter on the very existence of the Paraguayan Navy. A symbolic and definitive end.
So, what happened after the smoke cleared? What was the real fallout from this naval apocalypse? Well, the consequences weren't just strategic. They were absolutely catastrophic. It led to the total paralysis of the entire Paraguayan war machine.
This single event kicked off what military historians call a progressive operational collapse. Sounds kind of technical, but it's really just a domino effect of failure. It's the slow, agonizing death of an army's ability to do the basics, to move, to talk to each other, and to get supplies.
And this slide right here, it just lays out the brutal new reality of the war. On one side, you've got the Allies, who now completely own the rivers, just gliding around effortlessly with troops and supplies. And on the other, you have the Paraguayans, now trapped on land, forced to crawl through mud and jungle with their supply lines stretched to the absolute breaking point.
And all of this brings us to the ultimate takeaway. The scuttling at Vapor Cué wasn't a battle in the way we usually think of one, but its strategic impact was bigger than almost any single victory or defeat in the war's final phase.
For Paraguay, the war just became a landlocked nightmare. Without its fleet, the army was like a giant with its legs cut off. It just couldn't keep up with the Allied forces moving smoothly along the rivers. From that point on, the end was really just a matter of time.
And that's really the core lesson here, right? It wasn't just about losing some boats. It was about losing the ability to move. It was about losing the ability to fight a modern war in a landscape that absolutely demanded it.
And so we're left with this huge, timeless question about warfare. The men at Vapor Cué, they were undeniably heroic, no question. But their bravery was ultimately canceled out by a simple, brutal truth. An army cannot fight without food, bullets, and medicine. It's a stark reminder that in war, logistics isn't just part of the strategy, it is the strategy. And sometimes, the most important battles aren't won by soldiers, but by the people managing the supply lines.